Hi, and welcome to this course. In the next 60 minutes, you're going to go from a blank screen to a fully built Power BI dashboard using real Airbnb data and AI tools to get there. Here's exactly what we will build. We will start in Databricks, where we load the Airbnb dataset for New York into the cloud and use Genie AI to query it, asking business questions in plain English and watching it write the SQL for us. We then connect that data to Power BI Desktop and use Copilot to guide us through building 4 visuals: an area chart, a donut chart, a horizontal bar chart, and a 100% stacked bar chart. We finish by adding a slicer, a title, and final formatting to look like a real dashboard. By the end, you will have built something real with real data using the same tools that data professionals are using right now. So let's get started. If you do like this video, please do check out my other courses on Udemy. You can see links for them in the description of this video. But we have many courses here where you can learn SQL, Tableau, Power BI, and Excel. And you can also help you prepare for the Databricks Certified Data Analyst Associate exam. Okay, so before we actually touch any data, let's quickly cover what Databricks actually is, and we'll also just set up our free Databricks account in this video. So it's essentially a cloud-based data platform. You need to think of it like a workspace that lives in your browser because there's no software to install. All you need to do is sign in on a browser and then you're ready to go. And inside Databricks, we're going to work with something called a notebook. So a notebook is a document where you can write and run code, see your results instantly, and you work through your data step by step. Okay, and inside Databricks, we're also going to work with Genie AI. So Genie lets you ask questions about your data in plain English, and it will write the SQL for you. So instead of needing to know how to code, we could just write a question such as, what are the top 5 neighborhoods by average price? And Genie will figure out the query, run it, and give us the answer. So we're going to demonstrate all of this. And we'll work with an Airbnb dataset to do it. Okay, so let's first set up our Databricks account. All right, so I've just Googled Databricks free edition. And as I mentioned, there are 2 options. There's a free edition and there's also a free trial where you're given up to $400 credit to use. But those credits and that free trial would be for more advanced topics. We can just work with the free edition in this course. All right, so all you need to do is click into this and sign up for the free edition. And you'll need to sign up with your email address. And then you'll need to remember the password just for every time you log in, because the next day you will be automatically logged out after a certain amount of time. All right, so I'm going to log into my account that I have. But setting up the account will just take a few moments. So you would need to pause the video if you're following along and setting up an account before I start to show you the Databricks platform. All right, so whenever you have successfully set up your free Databricks account, you will see a page like this just whenever we're in the home, and you won't see any historical work that you've been doing unless you have already done some work in Databricks. This is where it would appear just below your resources. But everything can be accessed on the left-hand side here. If you can't see it, you just need to expand the toolbar. And this is where we can see our workspace, recent work, our catalog. So the Catalog Explorer is just where our data is stored. Okay, so next what we're going to do is actually upload our Airbnb data to this. But first I also want to cover what a schema and a catalog actually is. So let's do that. Okay, so Databricks uses 3 levels of organization. So at the top, you have a catalog. Inside that catalog, you have schemas. And inside the schema, you have your tables. So this is the Unity catalog hierarchy that Databricks uses as standard. So in our case here, the catalog will be Airbnb, the schema will be listings, and the table will be NYC. So that's the data set we'll be working with. And when you reference a table in SQL, you use the full 3-part path. So we have catalog, which is Airbnb, dot schema, which is listings, dot NYC, which is the table. Okay, so this is just telling Databricks exactly where to find the data. And we haven't built any of this yet, but that's what we're going to do next. We'll create the catalog and the schema, and then we'll load the Airbnb data in, and then start querying it straight away. All right, so back in our Databricks workspace, there are a couple of ways we could create our new catalog, which we're going to call Airbnb. And you can see I do have multiple catalogs already. This is where they're stored. So I have training catalogs, source data, retail analytics. These are just from previous projects. But we're going to create a new one that will appear here called Airbnb. And there is just a little plus icon here where we can add data. And we can also just create a catalog here. Or on the top right, we could click create and create a catalog. And then this pop-up will appear. And this is where we just need to give our catalog a name. Okay, so it's good to give a easy to understand name if anyone else was to be working with the data. So we'll just call it Airbnb so that we know what's the catalog, what data the catalog is storing. It will just be a standard and we'll just use default storage. It's that simple. And now that we've created the catalog, we can view it. You can click into view catalog and now we can see it appears on the left-hand side. And by default, you will get 2 schemas appearing straight away. One is called the default, which you could load data into, and the other is the information schema, which just stores some metadata. Okay, but whenever you click into this Airbnb, you will just be able to create a schema on the top right here as well. So we'll click create a schema and we'll give our schema our name, which is listings. Okay. And that is all we need to do. We don't need to store it externally. We just click on create. And then now we've expanded Airbnb on the left-hand side. You can see listings appears. So inside listings, this is where we'll actually load in our data. Okay, so up at the top right, this is where we can create a table. And we just create it by dragging across or browsing our local files to get the CSV that I have uploaded, and you'll see in the resources. So Airbnb data is the name. I'm just going to drag it across. You will also just get a preview once it has loaded. All right, so you can see here we do have a sample of our data. It's just previewing. And let's just quickly go through what each row is showing. So we have a host ID. So this is just a unique identifier for each host. When that host joined Airbnb or started renting from Airbnb, we have the name of their listing. We have the neighborhood. We have the property type, apartments or houses. We have room type, whether it's the entire home or private room. The zip code, how many beds are available. And then we just need to go across the number of records and then the number of reviews that they have. Okay, and at the top, you can just see here, we have the catalog, the schema, and the table name. So I am just going to rename this NYC because that would be a good name to have if this particular schema had listings for different cities. So the name would just split out which city the data is showing. You can see here, it's just previewing 50 rows and we have 13 columns. Okay, and then at the bottom right, we can just create the table. All right, so now you'll see a page like this, which just gives an AI suggested description of what the data actually contains. So it says this table contains data related to Airbnb listings in New York City. Details such as all of our columns and use cases could be analyze rental trends, evaluate neighborhood characteristics, and so on. So we can accept that. And that just adds a description to this table that's been generated automatically. We could edit it as well manually if we wanted, but it was quite good. And then it just shows the data types of each of our column names. Okay, so now this is ready to work with. So let's just start by writing some basic SQL in a notebook, and then we'll ask Genie some questions of this data. Okay, so to open a new notebook, we just click on this new at the top left, notebook. And this is the interactive document that I was talking about before, where we can actually write code. And you can write multiple coding languages in a document here. So at the top, you can see we have Python, Markdown, and SQL. So the notebook default is Python, but we're going to just change this to SQL. So you can see we get this %SQL that appears. And the way we can retrieve all of the data using SQL is by writing select star. So star means return all of the columns from, and then we need to enter our table name. So we're going to need to supply the catalog, the schema, and then the table name so that it knows where to retrieve the data from. And this would actually return all of the records because we have no limits here, but you can limit the output to 100 if you like, and it would run quicker. So at the top right, we do have this serverless warehouse, and this is the default for the free edition. It's the only warehouse or the type of compute that we can use. So this is what will start automatically whenever we hit execute. So there's two ways to execute a cell. You can either hit the run cell button here, the play button, or you can hit Control and Enter on your keyboard. And then it will just take a moment because it needs to start up this serverless compute. All right, so I did pause the video, but you can see that it took just 55 seconds to run that and get the output. And that was really just to start up this serverless compute, so future queries would run a bit quicker. But all this is displaying then is all of our columns from the table, and it's only showing 100 sample records. So if you scroll to the bottom, you can see there's just 100. Okay, and if we didn't want to see every single column, we can just select the columns that we want to see, such as the name, the neighborhood, and we do get this drop down that shows what you might be typing. So you can just click into that to speed things up, and then you can even just show the price as well. They all just have to be separated by a comma, but you don't add a comma to the very last one. And then we could execute that. And that's just going to return those 3 columns. And now you can see, because our serverless compute is already running, it's green. That means that it run very quickly, 2 seconds, and it's only displaying the 3 columns that we specified. Okay, and then the final basic SQL topic I did want to cover is just where. It's just how we can filter this output to match a condition that we specify. So say we wanted the neighborhood to have to be Manhattan, we could add a where. Okay, and the way SQL works is the first is select. It's the very first word you write. Then you add your column names, or you add star if you want to return everything. Next, you add from, and this is where you tell SQL where to get the data from. And then after that, we can add where. Limit always comes at the very end. Okay, so after where, this is where we need to enter our column, which is neighborhood. It has to be equal to. And then we open in our quotes. It has to be inside quotes because this is a string data type. It's a text data. And then inside the quotes, we can add Manhattan. Okay, and then if we execute that, the output will only show Manhattan. All right, so that is how we can manually write a basic SQL query. But from now on, we're going to actually get the help of Genie code to write the code for us, and it can also run the code for us and show us the results. So we'll start to do that next. But first, I'm just going to rename this notebook at the top Airbnb Analysis. Okay, so let's start working with Genie code. Okay, so to interact with Genie, there are 2 different ways we'll do it in this course. So the first one is on the right hand side, you'll see this Genie code. And then whenever we click into this, it opens up our sidebar. And we can click into this, what can Genie code do? And it will give us an answer if we want. It will just take a moment while it thinks before it returns the output. So it's saying I can help you analyze and visualize your Airbnb data. And then data analysis and exploration, notebook management, data discovery. It can do quite a lot of things. But we can just ask it a question here and ask it to do something for us. So what we're going to ask is, what are the top 5 neighborhoods by average nightly price? So if we just enter that, it will just take a moment. All right, and as you can see, it has automatically added a new code block. It hasn't affected our previous code block. It hasn't made any changes here, but it's added a new one. And then it is saying top 5 neighborhoods by average price, allow. And this means it will run the cell for us. And we can change this from ask every time to allow, always allow in current thread, or just always allow, but we'll keep it as ask every time just in case it was wrong. But if we click on allow here, it's going to run that code for us and return the output as well. So you can see here, it is Manhattan is the highest average price, followed by Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, and Bronx. So it has ordered the output. Okay, so this query may not be familiar to you because more topics have been introduced, such as aggregation and also group by and order by. But we can just click on accept here, and then that is the query and the result already. And then over on our output of Genie code, it has also just given us the output and some insights, such as Manhattan dominating with the highest average price, and then Staten Island ranking second. It's just some insights, but we can, if you didn't understand this query, when you click into the code block, you can access your commands by adding in the /, and then you can see the different commands we have here that Genie code can do for us. And if we wanted to explain the code for the current cell, you can just click on that explain, and then it's going to explain this code to us as well. Okay, and then you can see here now we have this query explanation. This query calculates the average nightly price for Airbnb listings. How it works: AVG price computes the mean price across all listings within each neighborhood, then rounds it to 2 decimal places. So this is why round is wrapped around the average price. Then we have our aggregation: count all, tallies how many listings. Group by neighborhood aggregates the listings by their neighborhood. And then we're ordering the output from highest to lowest. Okay, so that is one way that we can run code with the help of Genie code, all within the same notebook. But another way we can use Genie is on the left hand side here. You can see we have this Genie, and if we were to click into this, we can open up a new chat, but we do need to just select the data that we'll be working with. So this will be our NYC, and then we can create it. And now we have our own chatbot with Genie where we can just ask our questions. Very similar, but it's going to actually just run the output for us and display the output here. Okay, so I will just hide our Genie code. But on the right hand side, it does just give us some information about this space, really. What is the name it's been given? So it's NYC Airbnb listings analytics. So this has just been automatically generated, and we do also just get a Genie suggested description, which we can accept. And then it shows which data we're working with, and then we can apply some instructions here. So this is something that we may share with a stakeholder at the company. But let's ask our own question here. We'll ask it to show me the average review score for each combination of neighborhood and property type. Okay, and then now we have got the output. It's just giving us a quick overview, and then our results table of 59 rows. And now it's showing each neighborhood, each property type, and the average review score. And it's also even generated this heat map for us, which just shows all of the property types and neighborhoods, and then the average review score. The darker blue will mean higher, and the lighter blue means just lower, such as cabins and queens. Okay, and then even if we scroll back up, we can edit our question. So say at the moment it's not ordered. We want to see it in the highest average review. So let's just add a comma, ordered by highest average review. And then it will just do it again, but it will order the output with the highest average review appearing first. All right, so now you can see it's been ordered and we have our average review score. We have 3 with 100, we have 2 with 99, and now it's just ordered, which would be a better way to display it if we wanted to identify the highest reviewed property types in which neighborhood. Okay, and then we just get this heat map again. And if we did want to see the code and confirm that it's correct, you can just click on this show code, and it's just going to give us the code that the Genie used to show these results. All right, so before we actually connect Databricks to Power BI, let's just ask one more question, and we can just specify which visual or which chart we want to see in the output. So I've said display a bar chart, which shows the count of listings by beds. So we have the amount of beds in the listing in our data, sorted in descending order. Okay, so first it's going to show a result table. Again, we can see the code as well. And then we can see straight away that 1 bed is the most frequent listing type in this data set, followed by 2, followed by 3. And we do have some nulls in this data set as well. And then whenever we scroll down, we do just get this bar chart, which just instantly shows that 1 bed dominates this data set. All right, so next what we're going to do is connect Databricks to Power BI so that we can build our own interactive visualizations in Power BI. All right, so before we actually connect Databricks to Power BI and set up that connection so that Power BI can access this data that's stored in Databricks, you will just need to download Power BI. So if you have a Windows computer or laptop, you can download it directly from the Microsoft website. We have this Microsoft Power BI desktop, and you can just download the app here. But Power BI would only work on Windows laptops and computers. So if you're actually using a Mac, you may need to download and work with something like Parallels, which is where you can run Windows on your Mac. All right, but once you have successfully installed Power BI onto your laptop or computer, you can just access the home page and we will open a blank report. And this is what we will be working with to create our dashboard. Okay, and the best way to actually work with it and the most realistic real-life scenario way of working with Power BI is to have it connected directly to your database. So this is why we will set up a connection to Databricks. But if you did struggle or you want to just get straight into it, you can also just import that data set from Excel, and then it will just load into Power BI that way. But first we'll go to Databricks and set up the connection. And it's actually very straightforward in Databricks to do this. On the left-hand side, we have this marketplace. And what we can do here is search for Power BI in our products or up at the top here. So in our products, we'll search for Power BI. And then whenever you enter that, we have this Partner Connect integration. Okay, so we can click into this Power BI desktop integration, and that just helps us set up this connection. And it's instantly available, as you can see on the right-hand side. So we can just click on Connect. And what that's going to do, it's going to allow us to download a connection file. And that will download locally onto your PC or laptop. Okay, so you need to navigate to your folder to open it, or else you can just open it. I'm just going to open mine directly from here by clicking into it. And what that will do, it will open up Microsoft Power BI. All right, so it does just take a wee moment to set up the connection, but now you can see we have access to everything that was available in Databricks on the left-hand side. So you should see your catalog, your Airbnb catalog, which you can expand. And then you'll see your schemas. So I'll just expand this listings. It does just take a moment to load, but now we can see our NYC. So whenever we tick this data set, it's going to just preview it. And then once that preview has evaluated, we can load that data into Power BI then. And then we have a live connection to that data set. And any changes that happen in Databricks to the data set, because new data realistically would be getting added, will be reflected in the Power BI dashboard. Okay, so I'll just click on to load, and then that data will load. All right, so now we are on our report page of our report view of Power BI, and you can see on the right-hand side, we have this data pane. If you can't see it, it may be collapsed. You just need to expand it. And these are all of our fields that we can start to build visuals from. Okay, so what we're going to do next is start to work with Copilot and get it to provide us instructions to actually create the visualizations. And I do just want to point out that you will see Copilot here, but this is only available if the company or if you are paying for it, and it's very expensive in Power BI Desktop. It's not included in Microsoft 365 plans. It's a Microsoft Fabric plan that's needed. So you wouldn't be able to use Copilot within Power BI unless you have access to that. Okay, and if you did click on this, you would need to enter an email address and sign in. But even here, you need to have a work email to be able to sign in. Okay, so this is why we can't use Copilot here. We'll be using the Copilot chat. Okay, so I do just want to give a quick introduction to Copilot, which is what we will be using as our AI assistant for building in Power BI. So we'll be using Copilot Chat, and this is an external AI assistant. As I mentioned, it's not the built-in Power BI Copilot add-on. But all we want to do is ask it questions in plain English, and it will tell you exactly what to click and which fields to drag and how to build and format our visuals. But what actually makes a good prompt when we're using it to provide us instructions? Well, we need to provide the tool. We want to let it know that Power BI Desktop is what we will be using. And we also want to give the visual type that we want to create. Then we provide the fields that we want to use and the goal. So the goal is essentially what we want to show. So as you can see in our example prompt, how do I create a clustered bar chart in Power BI Desktop showing the number of listings, Airbnb listings by neighborhood, with neighborhood on the x-axis and listing count on the y-axis. Okay, so we do need to be specific, provide the tool, the visual type, and the exact name field names. We will also need to provide the name of the data set if we're asking it to create DAX formulas for us. So DAX is data analysis expressions, and these are calculations that are used to create new columns in our data set. All right, so there are two ways you can use Copilot. We can download Copilot for desktop. So you can get the Windows desktop app or the Mac desktop app and download it. Or you can just work through the browser and ask it the same way you would with any other AI tool like ChatGPT. Okay, and it would be better to sign in here so that it just remembers your historical chats if you did want to access them. But in this course, I will be using the downloaded version of Copilot Chat, and we can access our history and the sidebar and the settings on the left-hand side, and you can sign in as well. So I do have the personal plan, but you can use the free plan here. It's fine. All right, and we are going to build this dashboard now, and we will work through each chart individually with Copilot to help us provide instructions on how we can create each visual, format it nicely, and also add this filter on the right-hand side. Okay, so let's get started with Copilot. All right, so what we want to do is provide Copilot with the name of the table that we work with, which is NYC, and we also want to provide it with the fields that we'll be working with so that it knows all of the field names. Okay, and the way we can access a sample of our data is to actually just go to Databricks and limit the output and then export it, or I'm just going to copy it directly from the Excel workbook that we loaded initially. Okay, so you can just copy 10 records would be fine. Just ensure you include the column headers at the beginning so that Copilot knows the names of each column. Then we can copy this. And then inside Copilot, we can paste it in just so that it knows that this is the data set that we'll be working with. Okay, so I will just paste in the sample and it looks very unstructured, but the header names are at the top. It's just the way it's been condensed into the chat and Copilot will understand it. But we need to add a prompt here. We don't just supply the data set. So the prompt that we will provide is, above is a sample of the data set called NYC. So it is important to add that so that Copilot knows the name of the table that we work with. So it's called NYC. And then your task is to provide clear step-by-step instructions for building each visual I ask for. Always reference the exact field names from this data set. Specify which pane to use and assume I am working with Power BI Desktop. So the field names are all at the top here. Okay, so I just supply that prompt. And now very quickly it's just said, got it, Graham. I'll assume this exact structure and naming in Power BI Desktop. Name the visual type, specify the pane, reference the exact field names, and give step-by-step instructions. Okay, so the first chart we want to create is that area chart. So let's just provide a prompt. Using the NYC dataset in Power BI Desktop, provide step-by-step instructions to create an area chart with host since week starting on the x-axis and the unique count of host ID on the y-axis. So this is just going to show how many hosts have joined every week. And we want to see this unique count because some hosts have multiple listings. So we need to see unique host IDs. Okay, so Copilot will just come back and tell us the instructions, go to report canvas. So let's just minimize this and we'll open our blank canvas in Power BI. So I'll just make the canvas slightly bigger. You can minimize our filters. But it's telling us to ensure you're in report. So we're in the report view. Visualizations is here on the right hand side. Click on area chart. So area chart is this one. So once we click on that, it's going to add it to the canvas and resize and position it where you want. So we can just make it slightly bigger if we wanted to. Set up the x-axis. Locate host since week starting field. Okay, so we can see it here, host since week starting. Drag it onto the x-axis. If it shows as a hierarchy or unwanted granularity, well, it hasn't, but sometimes if this would show as a hierarchy of dates showing month, year, and week, we don't need that. Then it's saying to locate the host ID field, drag it into the y-axis. And it's now showing the count of host ID. But it's telling us to click the drop down next to host ID. So there's a little drop down here and change this to count distinct. Okay, and then it does give us some optional formatting, but we're going to do all of our formatting at the very end. All right, but whenever you expand this, then you'll see now the distinct count of host ID since week starting. And it's been very easy to follow those instructions. They work fine. And what we could do is remove this little final drop-off line because it's showing 14 hosts in August. And the way we can do that is just in our filters. So just ensure you've clicked into the chart, filters. So host since week starting, we can filter this in advanced filtering, and we want to change it to be before And this is where we can enter the date. So we'll just exclude all of August. So it has to be before the 1st of the 8th, 2015. And then whenever we apply that filter, it will just take a moment to load. You can see this little loading icon at the top left of the chart whenever the data is refreshing, but you can just see it just removes that drop-off line to just show this increase in new hosts with a few drop-off and then a few spikes, particularly after 2014. All right, so let's continue on and create our next visual. So the first thing we can do to continue on is actually copy this so that the size stays the same, so it's consistent across each chart. So we can Control and C, Control and V, and then it will copy. And if you want to line it up next to the chart to the left of it, you can see these red lines that appear at the top and bottom. So you want to just ensure that they match. Okay, and then we can paste it again and then bring a chart below. And then again, just ensure the red lines have lined up so that it is exactly below. And then we'll have one on the bottom right as well. So now we have 4 of the exact same chart, but we're just going to change these 3 charts now with the help of Copilot. Okay, so we're going to ask Copilot to help provide us instructions to create a donut chart showing the count of records by neighborhood. Okay, using the NYC dataset. So we'll get a similar output where it's just ensuring we're in the report canvas. Let me just minimize this again. Click the donut chart icon in our visualizations pane. So you'll want to ensure you've clicked into the chart, and we don't have to remove any fields. We can just change it to a donut chart by clicking onto the donut. But because we will be changing the fields, you can see here what it looks like. It would be good to actually just remove it because it's showing every single week here as a slice. So let's just remove these. And then on the fields pane, it's saying to find the field neighborhood. This is the neighborhood. Drag neighborhood into the legend. Okay, and then that defines each slice of the donut by neighborhood. Then set up the values. So it's telling us to find any fields that exists on every single row. So for this data set, you can safely use host ID or name because there's always one record per row. So let's use name. And then it's saying to drag it into values. And then next to host ID, we can click the drop down and just ensure it is set to count, but not distinct count. We are not counting the distinct host IDs because we want to see every single record, every single listing. And then it's giving us our optional formatting again. But as you can see, we have this donut chart that has simply been created with just a few simple steps. Okay, so next we'll move on to our next visual on the bottom left here. Okay, so I'll just click into this chart and we'll minimize Power BI so we can see Copilot here. But all we're going to say is using the NYC dataset provides step-by-step instructions to create a horizontal bar chart showing average price by neighborhood. Okay. So again, well, it's telling us to click on an empty area, but we've already added in a chart. We'll just want to remove this X and Y axis so that it's a blank chart. And let's just change the chart type to a clustered bar chart. This is the horizontal bar chart. So stacked bar chart, stacked column, and then clustered bar chart. So that's the one that we click. Now set up the axes, locate neighborhood and drag it into the Y-axis well of the visualizations pane. So we drag that in. Then in the fields pane, locate price. So the price is just here and drag it into the X-axis of the visualizations pane. Okay, and then click the drop down next to price. Because it's summed it by default, we want to change that to average. Okay, so now we have our horizontal bar chart. All right, so next will be our final chart. Now this is going to show listings by neighborhood and room type, and it's going to be at 100% stacked bar chart. So let's do that with the help of Copilot. All right, so for this final chart, I'm going to provide a slightly longer prompt. So we want to provide step-by-step instructions to create a 100% stacked bar chart with neighborhood on the x-axis, room type as the legend, and the values representing the count of records. So neighborhood on the x-axis is important to state because Copilot may have tried to put room type on the x-axis, but there are a lot of room types and we don't want these all to show as the x-axis. Okay, so whenever we enter that prompt, we just get a very similar output, but we want to click into it and change it to a 100% stacked bar chart icon. So we just need to find that. It's the one at the very top right. So we click into this and then it's telling us in the fields pane. Okay, first we'll just need to remove these. In the fields pane, find neighborhood and drag it onto the x-axis. Then we find room type and bring it into the legends well. And now we set up our values. So again, we want to show a field that appears on every row, for example, host ID, and then bring it into the y-axis. Okay, it's saying values well because sometimes this would appear as values, but it is the y-axis. This is the one that we're counting, the host ID. And we do just need to ensure we're counting it, not distinct count. Okay, so now whenever we expand this, we have our 100% bar chart. And now it's showing room type, and it's also just showing the neighborhood at the bottom. So we can see straight away from this visual that the Bronx has mostly private rooms, but Manhattan has mostly entire homes or apartments. All right, so now we have our 4 visualizations. So all we need to do now is add our filter to the right-hand side and then do some formatting, and then our Power BI dashboard is ready. All right, so let's ask Copilot to provide instructions to add this filter. And it is important to ensure that it won't add the filters just here, because this is not how a user would filter the dashboard. Okay, so in Copilot, I'll just paste in this prompt to provide step-by-step instructions to add a filter so the user can filter by property type. And this filter should work on all visuals on the page. Okay, and the way we can do that is to add a slicer visual onto the page. Okay, so I'm going to minimize filters. In the visualizations pane, click the slicer icon. So this is the third from the bottom in towards the middle. We have this slicer icon. Resize and position it. And then in the fields pane, locate property type and drag it across to the field well. So it'll just take a moment to load those property types, but they will all appear here now as a filter that we can use. Okay, and then we can confirm it filters on every visual. So let's just test it. So we can click on apartment, and then every visual here will load and change depending on the property type that we select. And you can see here now that every visual has worked. So let's just change it to bungalow. And now you can see everything. That's something that doesn't appear much, so we can see a very obvious change here. And whenever you just untick it, it's going to just show everything. All right, so let's do our final formatting. Let's add a title, change the title on each chart, change the color theme, and then we will be ready to show it to our stakeholders. All right, so you may have an idea of how we would add a title here, but let's just ask Copilot. So the prompt will be to use Power BI Desktop, provide step-by-step instructions to add a title to the report canvas, which says Airbnb dashboard. Okay, so we add a text box to the report canvas. So make sure we're on the correct report page. On the top ribbon, go to Insert tab, click on Text Box. So we have Insert, And then you can see we have text box here. Okay, and then click on it and it will appear, and we can drag it to the top where we want the title. And then we click inside the text box and type Airbnb dashboard. And then we can format it as well. So we'll start to format here and increase the size, increase the font, change the font weight to make it bold, and center the alignment. Okay. So first we'll just bring it to the top. So you will just need to click into it whenever you see the large cursor like this. Make it smaller and drag it across to the right. And then inside it, we want to add Airbnb dashboard. And then we can make it slightly larger. We can center it. We can highlight it all, to make it larger. We'll change it to 16. And we can also make it bold if we like. We can just change the font as well. All right, so let's just change the whole color theme of this dashboard. And we'll use one of the built-in themes. So we can state that we want to apply one of the built-in report themes to change the color scheme of the entire dashboard. So the way we can do this is on the top ribbon, go to the View tab. Okay, so we can go to View, and in the Themes section, which is just here, you'll see a row of theme thumbnails and a drop-down arrow. Okay, so we can view the themes by clicking on one of the visible thumbnails or clicking the little drop-down arrow and selecting one of the built-in themes. Okay, and you can test which theme you like. There are multiple different themes here that can be applied, but this is the one that we will go with. And the name of that theme is Innovate. Okay, it's the dark one on the left-hand side. But as I said, there are different themes here, and you can just try out the different ones and see which one you prefer. And there are some darker ones, there are some lighter ones, but they do just change the colors. Okay, but I'm just into Innovate here. So the final thing we'll want to do is just change each title and remove the axes labels, because we want each title just to state what the chart is showing, which means that we won't need the axis labels. And then we'll also just add some data labels to our bottom left chart here, which shows the average price. Okay, so again, to get instructions, we have a very similar prompt, but this time we're going to use Power BI Desktop, provide step-by-step instructions to do the following formatting changes across all visuals on the report canvas. Change each visual title to a custom name. Remove all axis titles from every visual, and remove all legend titles from every visual. So that means we want to remove all of these legend titles, all these axis titles, and change each title of each chart. So to change each visual title, select the visual by clicking into it. In the visualizations pane, go to the format pane, which is the paint roller icon. So you can see it here, format your visual. Under the visual settings, find title. So title is actually under general. We can see title here. So we can expand it, and then in title text, type your custom name. Example, average price by neighborhood, and repeat these steps for each visual. So let's do that first. Okay, so in text, we want to show new hosts over time. And then we can center this as well, just by changing the horizontal alignment. And then all we need to do is click into another visual, and this title stays here. It's just changing it to what it appears as in this visual. So we can change them all simply. Listings by neighborhood. And then that's just going to be centered as well. Then we have average price by neighborhood. Actually very close. We just need to remove the average of. I just want to remove that of. So we have average price by neighborhood. We'll center that. And then listings by neighborhood. And room type. Okay, so all 4 titles are now showing, they're stating what the chart shows. So we don't need these axes titles anymore. So what did Copilot say? Next, it said remove axes titles from every visual. For each visual, select the visual in the visualizations format pane, expand the x-axis. Okay, so I'll just keep it open. Format, expand the x-axis, and find the title and turn it off. Okay, and you can see that that has now been removed. Expand the y-axis and do the same and repeat for every visual. So y-axis is just below, turn it off. Okay, we don't need to do it for this donut chart. There is no x or y-axis, but we'll do it for our other charts here. So we have our y-axis first on this chart. So we'll remove that title. Then we have our x-axis. And then we'll do the same here. Okay, so now all our x and y axes has been removed. Finally, we just have these 2 legend titles. So under Copilot, it just says in the visualizations format, expand legend. So let's just minimize our x and y axes, and then we have legend. If we expand that, you can see we have title here. We could change the title, but we just want to remove it because it's quite obvious what it's showing. And we'll do the same above. And we could change where this appears. So the way we can do that is just under position. So again, under options, position, we could change it. And I like just showing the legend in the bottom center. Or you could do it over to the right hand side on the center right, or sorry, center left or center right. But I'm just going to show it on the bottom center. Okay, and hopefully by now you know how to format it, all of the visuals. It is just, you click into the visual, format your visual. And the last thing I want to do is add some data labels to this visual. But one thing you'll notice is that this is showing average price, but it's currently just showing a number, a decimal number. So the way we can change that is by clicking into the price and just changing this format here to a currency. Now it's showing many decimal places here, but we can just change that as well. Under, it's currently showing as auto. We could just change it as 0 or 1 decimal place. Okay, and then to make this title bigger, as you know, we can just change the font size if we like, and we could change it to a different type of font as well. All right, I'm going to show it as bold. And one optional change on the bottom left chart here, because we've added our data labels, is to actually remove our x-axis completely. We don't need to see those values anymore because they appear in the visual itself. Okay, so that is how we can create a basic Power BI dashboard with the help of Copilot.